Dark awakening. 5 signs you're accessing forbidden spiritual power. There is a point on the spiritual path where the rules begin to dissolve, not because you've lost your way, but because you've started to remember that the path you walk wasn't meant to follow rules in the first place. There's a shift where the light begins to flicker, not in failure but in initiation, and the language changes. Suddenly it's not about chakras and peace, it's not about endlessly raising your vibration or aligning with a sanitized version of truth. It's about something far deeper, far older, far more dangerous to the systems that keep humanity asleep. This is where the dark awakening begins, and if you've felt it, if you've watched your reality twist itself open, if you've walked through silence so loud it deafened everything you thought you were, if you felt power rise through your body that no book ever prepared you for, you are already accessing forbidden spiritual power. This isn't for everyone. That's not ego, that's energetic fact. The dark awakening doesn't flatter your identity, it strips it bare. It's not blissful, it's brutal. And that brutality isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You start to realize that the forces who kept spirituality soft and clean were never offering freedom, they were offering containment. You were told to fear the dark, to repress the rage, to silence the voice. But what if everything you were taught to suppress was actually the signal that you're remembering what you are?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Let's talk about the first sign you're accessing forbidden spiritual power. Your perception begins to fracture, but you don't feel broken. You start to see layers in people, not just moods or emotions, but fractals of identity. You look at someone and you can feel the contradiction between what they say and what they mean, between who they present as and who they truly are beneath the mask. This isn't imagination, this is sight, a multidimensional form of awareness that penetrates beyond the veil. And while others are still navigating reality on one frequency, you're already moving between 3 or 4, tracking timelines, sensing outcomes, feeling the distortion behind language. It can be overwhelming, it can be destabilizing, but it's not confusion, it's capacity expanding. The second sign is your energy starts repelling things that are out of integrity, and not gently. You don't need to set boundaries anymore because your vibration is the boundary. People who can't hold truth begin to distance, conversations collapse, environments shift, and you might start to think you're doing something wrong until you realize what's actually happening. You're not breaking things, you're revealing what was never real to begin with. This is what forbidden power does. It doesn't adjust to the environment. It forces the environment to recalibrate, or it ejects the parts that refuse. Your frequency starts acting like an algorithm cleaner, deleting programs in people's fields just by existing near them. They feel it, you feel it, and though no words are spoken, the work is done. Third, time begins to distort around you, not metaphorically, literally. You lose track of hours, days stretch and collapse. You think about someone and they call. You speak a thing and it happens. You experience déjà vu so vivid it feels like you've slipped into another layer of yourself. And maybe you have, because what's really happening is that you're not just observing timelines anymore, you're bending them. You're becoming an active participant in the architecture of reality. And this is why Forbidden power is never taught in systems that want control, because once you know you can alter timelines with your own embodied frequency, you stop obeying the ones they gave you. Fourth, your body becomes a battleground. You start feeling sensations, energies, pains, and pulses that have no medical explanation. You wake up with exhaustion even though you slept. You get surges of fire in your gut or tingles in your spine for no reason. You start to shake during meditation or feel like you're being pulled out of your skin. This isn't dysfunction, this is integration. Your body is catching up to your power, and sometimes that recalibration is violent, because to hold this level of energy, your vessel must be stripped of everything that can't contain it. You're not just purging trauma, you're activating circuitry. And that circuitry was hidden for a reason, because if you ever accessed it fully, the systems built on human limitation would collapse. And the fifth sign is the most subtle, yet the most terrifying to those still living in the old paradigm. You no longer seek to be saved. You no longer need a teacher, a guru, a guide, not because you're arrogant, but because you remember there's a knowing in your bones now, a quiet, ancient certainty. You've looked into the abyss of yourself and didn't find demons. You found sovereignty. You've heard the silence behind the fear and recognized it as power. You are no longer trying to ascend. You are becoming the force that chooses when and how to rise or fall. This is forbidden power. This is what the mystics whispered about but rarely wrote down, because this kind of awakening doesn't make you enlightened in the way people expect. It makes you dangerous to the illusion. So now I ask you, and I want you to feel this question, not just in your mind, but in your gut, your heart, your entire field. If you are truly accessing forbidden spiritual power, are you willing to let go of the version of yourself that was built to be acceptable in a world you came to reset? Owning the forbidden current. When you no longer serve the system, you become the disruptive truth it fears. There is a shift that happens the moment you stop apologizing for your energy, not just in the way you speak or move, but in the way the world begins to respond to you. You're no longer projecting potential or begging for resonance. You're walking in the voltage of your own remembered truth, and it changes everything. This is the part they never talk about in the polished spiritual spaces. The part where power stops feeling poetic and starts feeling like pressure, not because you're broken, but because you're carrying something the system cannot hold without fracturing. When you begin owning the forbidden current flowing through you, you are no longer safe for illusions. You become a walking energetic disruptor. You enter a space and things start to fall apart, not because you're causing harm, but because your presence reveals where things were already broken. This is the weight of being awakened at the shadow level. You don't just spot misalignment, you embody a frequency so coherent that everything around you must either recalibrate or rupture. And the deeper truth? You didn't choose this. This power didn't arise because you studied enough or healed enough or meditated hard enough. It was coded into you from the beginning. Your traumas didn't create this current. They simply cracked you open wide enough for it to come online. You can no longer serve the system once this happens. Not the matrix that sold you comfort as salvation, not the relationships built on performance, not the jobs or spiritual teachings that trained you to regulate your power into something acceptable. Forbidden energy doesn't negotiate. It doesn't wait for permission. It moves when it's ready. and it speaks in the voice of direct knowing. This is why so many of us are pushed into isolation before the full current can stabilize. Not to suffer, but to shed, to disconnect from every anchor that was holding us in someone else's version of truth. And when the shedding is complete, you realize something wild and undeniable. The very things you were taught to fear about yourself, the intensity, the rage, the silence, the visions, the cycles, the chaos, the fire, were never flaws. They were keys. Each one was a suppressed aspect of your true operating system. And when you unlock them without apology, the system that trained you to dilute yourself starts to tremble because it realizes it no longer owns you. This is the moment where you start moving differently. You no longer lead with explanation, you lead with field. Your body becomes the sermon. Your presence becomes a teaching, not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you've become real. And realness in a world of projection is the ultimate heresy. The forbidden current does not exist for the sake of rebellion. It exists to restructure timelines from the inside out. You aren't here to escape this world. You're here to overwrite the code in real time. You'll notice the impact quickly. People will react without knowing why. Some will ghost you, others will obsess, some will get defensive over things you never even said. That's how you'll know your current is working. It's not about being liked. It's about activating truth. And that truth can't always speak in words. It speaks in presence, in what you're willing to embody without explanation. But this path will test you. There will be moments where you will want to go back, moments where being normal feels like it might finally bring peace. You will feel the urge to dim again, not for comfort, but for connection. And every time you do, your energy will respond instantly. You will feel drained, off, restless, because your body can no longer carry the weight of pretending. Your system now has a threshold for truth, and anything below that threshold will feel like poison. So what do you do when you can't go back and you're still learning how to hold what's rising in you? You choose precision over comfort. You hold your alignment even when it makes others uncomfortable. You release people who can't meet you where you are, not with judgment, but with clarity. You refine your environment, your input, your rituals, your choices, because when you carry forbidden current, your frequency is no longer a personal experience, it's a global ripple. Your embodiment becomes the reset point for entire fields of energy. And it's in this place that you stop wondering if you're worthy, you stop asking whether you're good enough, healed enough, pure enough. You remember that you are the technology, that your body, your voice, your field, when undistorted, is the very thing this planet has been waiting for. You don't need to become someone else. You need to become fully yourself, without filter, without flinch. So let me ask you now, not as a question to your mind, but as a command to your soul. If you accepted that your frequency is already disrupting the system just by being authentic, what would you stop explaining? What would you finally embody fully, even if no one around you understood why it matters? When the power stops whispering and starts leading, the day your shadow becomes the signal. There's a moment on every true path of awakening where what was once a whisper in your soul becomes a force in your body, the subtle inner knowing that quietly guided you through confusion, chaos, and collapse. It stops whispering, it starts leading, loudly, unapologetically, not through words or ideals, but through your entire being. That's when everything changes. That's when your shadow stops being something you navigate and becomes the signal that everything else in your life begins to move in response to. Until now, you may have treated your shadow like something to heal, to control, to manage. Maybe you've tried to spiritualize it into silence. Maybe you've tried to dress it up with light codes and positive language, but you've realized by now none of that worked. Because your shadow isn't here to be erased, it's here to become your compass. And when you start to embody the power of your shadow, not from shame but from sovereignty, you start moving different. Not because you've reached enlightenment, but because you've entered embodiment. When your shadow becomes the signal, you stop trying to fit the mold. You don't dilute your truth to make others feel safe. You don't shrink your frequency to protect someone else's comfort zone. You realize your energy was never meant to match the world around you. It was meant to reshape it. You become the calibration point, not because you say you are, but because your vibration demands it, and the power that rises in you doesn't come from superiority. It comes from accuracy. It comes from being exactly who and what you are, without permission and without delay. People feel it. They respond to it whether they want to or not. Some follow, some disappear, some try to fight it, but the current has shifted, and you're no longer here to explain your truth. You're here to radiate it. And this kind of leadership isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about walking in such alignment with your essence that everything false becomes exposed just by proximity. You don't chase visibility anymore. You become unavoidable. You don't market your identity, you embody your impact. Your energy begins speaking louder than your voice. The rooms you enter shift before you say a word. You notice how people start to change around you, not because you teach them, but because you're transmitting something alive. This is what happens when the shadow becomes the signal. You don't just carry knowledge, you carry resonance. And resonance is undeniable. But let's not romanticize it. This is not always comfortable. This is not always peaceful. When your shadow leads, it will move you into spaces where the truth must be spoken, no matter the cost. It will ask you to walk alone, not as punishment, but because your path isn't built for the masses. It will ask you to burn things you once begged for. It will ask you to let go of everything you once believed made you good, worthy, or light enough. Because your power is not in your perfection, it's in your presence. And presence means you're not filtering your frequency to meet external expectations. You're not dimming your fire to look more balanced. You're not softening your truth to appear more evolved. You're moving from center, from a place so deeply rooted in your knowing that everything you touch is affected, intentionally or not. You might lose people here. Not everyone is ready to meet a human being who's fully led by their integrated shadow. It breaks illusions, it disrupts roles, it dismantles projections. And that's exactly what you're here for. Because the truth is, the more fully you embody your forbidden power, the more invisible structures begin to collapse inside relationships, organizations, even collective timelines. You become the energetic shockwave that recalibrates systems, not because you force them to change, but because they can no longer hold themselves together in your presence without becoming honest. This is leadership beyond labels. This is what the world is truly hungry for. People who don't just preach truth, but live it. even when it costs them comfort, clout, or connection. You are no longer walking as a seeker, you are walking as a signal. And that means you can't afford to second-guess what you feel anymore. You can't afford to ask for permission to be what your soul already signed a contract to become. So I ask you this, right now, in full truth, what version of yourself are you still protecting that's no longer aligned with the signal you were born to become? And what would happen in your life, your relationships, your mission, if you let that version die today? You are the forbidden frequency, the final activation of power that resets everything it touches. This is the moment you've been circling your entire life. Not the moment of arrival, not some external victory, but the moment you remember fully, not in fragments, not in phases, but in total embodiment. That you, yes, you, are the forbidden frequency itself. You're not here to align with a system, you are here to undo it. You are not here to follow a path, you are the path. The dark one, the unlit one, the coded one, the one only souls of your lineage can recognize without words. When you accept this truth, your life no longer follows human logic. You move like a signal, quiet, precise, and undeniable. You enter a space and the energy either rises or exits. You speak and timelines respond. You breathe and ancestral bonds shift. Because the frequency you carry doesn't adjust, it doesn't bow, it doesn't dilute. It only does one thing. It activates what's real and collapses what's false. That is what makes it forbidden. Not because it's bad, but because it cannot be controlled. Your power was never meant to be understood by the many, it was meant to be remembered by the few. Those who feel your presence and know immediately that something ancient is moving, that something primal and intelligent is awake behind your eyes. You don't just hold information, you transmit initiation. This is why your presence has always felt like too much for some people, because you aren't just a person. You are a code becoming form. You are the embodiment of a future that refuses to be built on a lie. But to live at this level means you must give up every old strategy that was built around being safe. The persona you wore to survive, the masks you used to connect, the performances you used to keep peace. They can't come with you, because when you are the forbidden frequency, there is no in-between. You are either transmitting truth or you are betraying your soul. You are either walking in full coherence or you are being drained by your own hesitation. The ones who carry this level of power are not chosen because they are perfect. They are chosen because they are unwilling to pretend anymore. They are chosen because they have stopped bargaining with their truth, because they are willing to lose everything that is false in order to stand inside the field that can reset everything. This final activation doesn't happen in a ceremony. It happens when you stop waiting. It happens when you wake up one morning and decide that your presence alone is enough to change the room, that you don't need another certification, another download, another sign. You are the sign. You are the code. You are the final frequency this world has been programmed to fear. So what happens now? You begin walking through life not as a seeker, but as a source. You start speaking as if truth is already sovereign. You start creating as if timelines are already listening. You stop apologizing for your intensity, your clarity, your unfiltered transmission. You stop chasing healing and start radiating coherence. You stop debating your worth and start embodying your mission. This is the end of one version of you, the version that questioned, that hesitated, that begged to be seen while hiding the most powerful parts. That version served you. It protected you while your system integrated. But now it's done. Now the real you has arrived. So I ask you this, not as a question, but as a challenge, a spell, an invocation of your deepest alignment. If you accepted right now that you are the forbidden frequency, what would you immediately destroy? What would you finally create? And what would you never apologize for again? Because now the world isn't just waiting for you to show up. It's preparing itself to rebuild around your truth.